Let's get started. Yeah, welcome everyone. Have you all been okay? Yeah, good. It's been quite a long time since we met. It feels like a long time since the Bodhicitta module. Um, what did you do in between? What did Venerable Namjong do the last module on? Daily practice?
No, the last one was on transforming problems.
Oh, right. Lojong.
Yeah.
Mind training, transforming problems into the path. Yeah. I
And
hope you
lost,
will find that useful. Okay, so this module, so this module on the spiritual teacher is very short. Actually, it's the shortest module. I think we're just going to do 3 sessions, right? I think that's all we planned on. Yeah, that'll fit well. And then there's a module on Tantra, which Venerable Namjong will teach. Actually, I was thinking earlier I would do it, but as it turns out that the scheduling, yeah, it works. Well, I mean, in chronological order, it's his turn. And the scheduling also works much better because I'll be doing my final like Geshe thing, Geshe examination, and then going to Nepal and traveling and stuff during that time. So it'll be better. So this will be my last module with you all for this course, but I'm sure we'll meet again at some point. Yeah, so with just 3 sessions on the spiritual teacher. So I thought today's session will just do preliminary prayers like usual, and then I'll explain a few things about relying on a spiritual teacher. And then I thought we'd try to have fit-in discussion group and meditation both today, especially relying on a spiritual teacher. I think there's a lot of questions that come up about it. I mean, naturally, and there's a lot of things kind of discussed. So it's very helpful actually to discuss with peers, who have similar doubts. It's very helpful to discuss about it. But also, of course, we'll have question and answer time for questions. So yeah, so let's start with our preliminary motivation, like usual. Just kind of sit quietly in your meditation posture or something similar, and then check the state of your own mind. Try to focus one's attention on an object of meditation for a minute or so to generate some mental focus. And then as a basis for generating bodhicitta motivation, then it's helpful to visualize ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. So with our mother and father to our left and right, and then our other friends and family to our left and right and behind us. In this life, we have a relationship with them such that they're supportive. These ones are supportive of us. And then other sentient beings who in this life we have an antagonistic relationship with. We have to make a special effort to practice patience and generate loving kindness, compassion towards them. So we visualize them seated directly in front, facing towards us, to help be more aware of our kind of the attitudes we generate towards them. And then all the other sentient beings towards whom we have a neutral attitude. Then we visualize in human form in order to make a kind of create a cause so that we can actually encounter them in human form and thereby benefit them in the future. As opposed to, if they're in the form of an animal or hell being, then we can't really do much to benefit them in terms of Dharma. So we visualize all sentient beings appearing in human form, seated all around us. And remember our interconnectedness with all of them, how they affect us, we affect them. And then especially remember how they're all the same as us and wishing to have happiness and well-being and wishing to be free from every form of suffering. So then with recognizing that as a basis, then try to generate an altruistic motivation or bodhicitta motivation for this session. Thinking, in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to myself and also others. And free myself and others from suffering and bring myself or create causes for the full enlightenment of myself and all sentient beings. And I'll engage in this session on the spiritual teacher. Oh. And then we can recite this prayer of the four immeasurable thoughts to enhance our kind of motivation. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and anger towards enemies. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to have happiness and their causes of happiness. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from these. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be for all sentient beings to never be separated from the happiness which is totally beyond suffering. May they never be separated from this. I myself will cause them to be never separated from this. Please grant me blessings to be able to do this. And then since this is still the month of Sakadawa, when we celebrate the Buddha's birth, showing the aspect of birth, enlightenment, and parinirvana, then why don't we visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space before us. Remember all his enlightened qualities. And then if you like, you can also visualize representations of the Dharma and the Sangha jewel, 3 objects of refuge, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Imagine in the space before us. And then if you like, generate the mind of refuge. Also, you can visualize others, your own teachers of this life or other holy beings, and you turn to for guidance. And then we can recite the Buddha's name mantra there at the bottom of the page. Tayata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Swaha is a way of going for refuge. So as you recite, you can also visualize white light, first white light rays, radiating out, purifying oneself and all sentient beings, and then golden light rays radiating out from the Buddha's holy body, blessing oneself and all sentient beings to develop all the realizations on the path and to have every form of well-being and happiness. And then imagine the Buddha is very pleased with you and then shrinks in size and comes to abide above the crown of your head. Same with all the other sentient beings visualized around you. Okay. So we can stop our preliminaries there. So, relying on a teacher. I wonder, why do you think we put this module actually in the order of the way the FPMT has Discovering Buddhism set out? This is like the 4th module, I think. But we've made it like the 12th, I think. So why do you think we put it that way at the end? Any ideas? Other than Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen we've discussed it with because we have to plan with Mary Ellen. But
I guess my thought is you have to know more about Buddhism before you start picking a teacher. You just have to have more knowledge and know whether this is really what you want to do, right? Before you pick a teacher.
well, definitely, yeah. But I mean, as a what is it? A disclaimer, because you're taking the module doesn't mean you have to take a teacher.
Right.
Right? This doesn't. That's not part of the required activities for the module to take a teacher. But yeah, it's true. No, just to know about, to understand the whole purpose of the need for a teacher, how to relate to a teacher, and kind of the reasoning behind the explanations about how to relate to a teacher. You need a lot more background understanding. Yeah, you need the more you have, the more easy it is. It's much more helpful. Yeah. Any other ideas about maybe
Yeah,
why
well,
we
the
put it at
same
the end?
same along the same lines, that having enough context for it, because if you get it too early, it could be strange for people, Western people who don't have the cultural experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's our main thinking really, is that because of all the topics in the like Discovering Buddhism in the path, like this is the one that it, it's most difficult to explain in a lot according to just logic and reason. It's most difficult to understand in a kind of secular way and according to just logic and reasoning. And it's probably there's the greatest danger of people, newly approaching Buddhism, um, to kind of be put off by, in a way, or be confused by, or feel like, oh, that's very religious-y. So it's the least kind of clearly tied with like just like psychology or philosophy. It's the most kind of religious, in a way, aspect of all the or topic of all the topics I think in discovering Buddhism, except maybe Tantra. I mean, Tantra is also quite kind of religious-y in a way. Although, I mean, they all have a strong support of, philosophy, logic, psychology, but yeah, in the ordinary way of looking at it, it looks quite like, especially like, the kind of Christian religious background that most of us are kind of from. Although it's very different, completely different than any kind of Christian ideas or way of relating to a teacher in the deep way. So yeah, so that's why we put it at the end. Yeah. Yeah. But again, yeah, I mean, the way we're presenting it here is just like to inform. No, there's no expectation that you take anyone as a teacher or not. That's completely personal, a choice. But yeah, it's good just to know about, well, what is the why is it considered important to rely upon a teacher, and then how to check. Well, I'll go ahead and share I made some PowerPoint slides, so I'll go ahead and share that. And then we start going through the stuff. Okay, so now it's full screen, right? You don't see all the toolbars. Okay, good. Okay, so this module, relying the spiritual teacher. So yeah, so I don't know, I just started making the outlines last night, so it might change, but first just some introduction, and then the qualities of the teacher. So qualities of a teacher that is suitable to rely upon. Then the qualities of the student, that's us, what kind of qualities we should check that we have or not. So I'm hoping to go through those three in this session today. And then the main kind of practice of relying on a teacher is how to rely on thought and how to rely on action. And then there's the benefits of correctly relying upon a teacher and the drawbacks of not doing so. In the traditional outlines, actually that comes first, but here I think it's probably better to put at the end because it, yeah, I don't know, kind of makes a little bit more sense in one way. So, so introduction. So as far as introduction, yeah, I saw in the readings, I started looking at the kind of required readings for this module. Always I use the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by Pabonka Rinpoche as a basis for outlines typically. Although in this module, I think I won't stick very closely to his outlines. I'll change them a bit. But in the required readings, well, there's, okay, Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand by Pabonka Rinpoche. Then there's this book by Alexander Berzin. I think it gives two different names in the material I had. In the first where it says required reading, it's I think it's relating to a spiritual teacher, or relating to a spiritual friend, I think. And that's a very good book. When I was new to Buddhism, I found that and very confused about the whole relying on a teacher thing. That was extremely helpful, I found. I never took a Discovering Buddhism course as a student when I was new. I just attended different, teachings in India and Nepal. It would have been helpful, actually. But and then the other required readings are all by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. That's the point I was coming to. In the packet of PDF of articles, there's 4 articles by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then but the place I'd start, there's one separate article. I think it's in your packet too. It's not in the required reading packet, but here I'll pop it up now because I think I have it open. It's this one. Yeah, it's called Guru Devotion, a brief introduction for new students. Is that in your packet? Have you seen? I'm testing to see if any of you even looked at the required readings yet. Anyway, in the one I have, I think I have, I don't know, I think it's like center materials from 2021 or something. but this is one of the ones in there. This is a good place to start, actually. But yeah, I mean, for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, of all my teachers and all the teachers I've ever heard speak about Buddhism, he emphasizes guru devotion the most, and stresses the importance of it the most. I mean, because it is right at the beginning of the Lam Rim, so it's right at the beginning of the path, the way it's taught. But the Lam Rim, the way the Lam Rim is set out, as I probably mentioned before, is really for people who are already Buddhist. Basically, it's like for people who are already Buddhist, they already have refuge, they already have faith and all this stuff, and then kind of reminding them what is most important. So for people who are not already Buddhist, it's not doesn't really fit to teach about guru devotion at the beginning, because that's not what they're interested in, right? That's not what's going to be most helpful for them right at the beginning. But for for people who already have some understanding of the Buddhist path, and then and really to get a complete sense of what Buddhist practice is, you do have to know about. I mean, because if for a person who decides actually to want to fully practice Buddhism, then it is a huge part of the practice is relying on a teacher and relating to a teacher, and it's a very important part. So that's what I'll try to start to give a sense of today. So in the introduction, then, yeah. So first, what is a spiritual teacher? Okay, so spiritual teacher, Lama is the Tibetan word, Guru is the Sanskrit. Yeah, so a teacher, there's different types of teachers actually, and that's probably in Alexander Berzhin's book relating to a spiritual friend. That's kind of one of his main point, and the most helpful thing I found about the book is that actually, as a spiritual practitioner in general, as someone interested in Buddhism or practicing Buddhism in particular, then we have different kinds of teachers. It's not like everyone we consider a teacher we have to consider or relate to in the same way. And just because we've received teachings from someone or participated, or like taken a course with someone, or been in a retreat that was led by someone, or meditation sessions led by someone, it doesn't mean we have to see that person as our teacher, like with the big T. So first of all, like, maybe first of all, that point is essential. Like, what does it mean for someone to be our teacher is when we generate the recognition, oh, they're my teacher, I'm their student. So it's really from our side. When we generate the discrimination, we generate the recognition that we want to take that person as a teacher. We want to see that person as a teacher. So that's different from like, okay, if you go to a center or participate in an online course and someone is like I am now, like explaining about the Dharma, then you can just see that as like an ordinary like course in college or university or some other training. You can learn from that person, gain information, maybe gain some inspiring advice or whatever, but you don't have to like see yourself as that person's disciple and they're my teacher. No, it can be more just like, that's why usually when I give talks I say, we should just think of each other as like Dharma friends, where one has more experience, one has less. Like in the monastery, probably the monks in the monastery I learn the most from are my classmates, because we ask each other questions, difficult points, I ask them, they explain to me, but we're peers. It doesn't mean like they're my teacher just because they explained something helpful to me or gave me some very good advice. It's just, they're just helping me. So, so in a Dharma center, when we go to like guided meditations or go to lectures, or even if there's a high Lama coming, even if a famous Lama like comes to the center and is giving a talk, you don't have to think, oh, just because they're a famous Lama, and if I go and listen, then that means they're going to be my teacher. Like that's wrong, right? So you can go listen to people give Dharma talks and just see them as like an instructor. I think that's the term Berzhin uses, is like, and kind of in a way, the least level of teacher in a way is like, you know, someone guiding meditations or leading discussion groups, or even if you go and someone's giving a formal teaching, you can just see it as kind of a class, you know? And so you respect that person as someone who has maybe more knowledge than you, can explain well, maybe they can benefit you, but it doesn't mean you have to enter into this particular kind of relationship where you're their disciple and they're your lama or your guru. So that's why actually we often use the term like lama or guru, because it does have a kind of a more spiritual, more heavy kind of connotation than just teacher. You know, the word teacher we use in a more ordinary way, but that's why when they say the spiritual teacher, it has this different kind of connotation than just secular teacher, right? So yeah, so we can attend any kind of lecture and just see someone as like in the same way as like we would a secular teacher. But then, so when does someone actually become your guru? One is, or your spiritual teacher is mainly when you generate the discrimination that I want to enter in this kind of way of relating to them, as like seeing them as like my guide, my teacher. But also that automatically is expected if you take vows from a teacher, right? Or an initiation. So if you decide to take like refuge with someone, take refuge precepts from a teacher, or you take bodhisattva vows, or someone's given an initiation and you, as you know, you attend and you think, oh, I'm taking the initiation, then automatically like you're taking them as a teacher. Really, it's like in that case, it's almost like I mean, it could be the case that you don't really realize that that's part of taking the initiation, is taking them as a teacher. But from the teacher's side, they'll expect that, oh, you're here, you're taking the initiation, then you're committing myself to be my student, you know. So that's also good to be aware of, because that could lead into confusion. Now, there are some exceptions, like, well, there's a question that always comes up, I mean, in Tibetan Buddhism, about what about, a lama's giving an initiation or giving an empowerment? Can you just attend like without taking it? And in Tibetan culture, like people do that a lot. Tibetans do that a lot. But that you really have to be kind of careful about. I mean, if you want to be strict, like, well, I mean, it's definitely like a highest yoga tantra, like empowerment or teaching. Like if you're not going to take, you shouldn't attend. Like you shouldn't go. But like a Chenrezig empowerment or a White Tara long life empowerment, those are ones that very commonly a teacher give, especially long life empowerments. That is kind of like, yeah, anybody can attend, even a Kalachakra. Kalachakra is its highest yoga tantra, but it's kind of an exception. That anybody can go, and yeah, it's kind of okay, you be there, and even you don't think, oh, I'm taking the empowerment, I'm not taking the commitments, and even you think I'm not going to take the person as a teacher. Those ones, it's kind of okay to be there. There's not like a crystal clear line of these ones you can go to without taking it, and these ones you can't. But it's something you sort of have to sort of feel out by asking people around the time of the event. But generally, like long life empowerments, I mean, I'm just thinking what's ordinary in Tibetan society, as kind of a representation of what's the norm of expectation from the side of the Lama, and also, yeah, especially from the side of the Lama, about whether you're entering into a guru-disciple relationship. So like long life empowerments, and kind of the lower tantra initiations like Medicine Buddha, Chenrezig. Yeah, those generally it's kind of okay to be there, participate, and not think you're taking the Lama, giving it as a teacher. But definitely, if there's empowerments where you take vows, and if you participate, thinking, okay, now I'm taking refuge vows, now I'm taking bodhisattva vows, now I'm taking tantric vows, now I'm taking the commitments of this initiation, then definitely you're taking that teacher as your teacher. No. And you should relate, then you should do this practice of, relating to them as your spiritual teacher from that time onwards. So yeah, so maybe back to, so what is a spiritual teacher? I mean, this is a huge question. I don't think I could spend the whole, I think, module just talking about that. But maybe, okay, so I mentioned in one way there are, like, you can see someone as a secular teacher, then you don't have to practice this kind of relying on Buddha as a guru. But so the main thing is from your side, if you generate the discrimination, they're my teacher, then you have to kind of, basically the practice is seeing them as a Buddha, seeing them in a completely pure way, seeing only positive qualities and not seeing any faults. But we'll come back to that. But that's kind of why it's something you want to be careful about before you decide to relate to someone in that way, because it's not easy to do. But then, so if you take vows from someone, then yeah, then they're your teacher. But also, if you take vows, take refuge with someone, take bodhisattva vows, take initiation from someone, it doesn't mean you have an intimate personal relationship with them necessarily. It might just be, you just met them once, you took vows, and then, you respect them, you see them as your teacher, but it doesn't mean like they need to intimately become acquainted with you, and you need to ask them every question, every life decision you make, you have to consult with them. Usually that kind of teacher, we only have a few. It's better just to have a few, just one or two. So that there'll be one or two teachers that you have that you feel very close to, and you really, every major decision you kind of make, you check with them, and you kind of, I don't know, they're the main one that you sort of take guidance and take inspiration from. Yeah. But I mean, but in a way, like, I mean, yeah, maybe to give a context for this whole thing, guru devotion. So, yeah, and this is why it's kind of, well, in a way, I mean, what is a spiritual teacher? Ultimately, I mean, there's one line I found really helpful from Habonka Rinpoche's Calling the Guru from Afar, the extensive version, where he says something to the effect of, like, may I see the guru as the bare nature of my like innate mind, basically. So in a way, like, the ultimate guru is our own mind. The external guru, the teacher we're relating to, their whole role is to help us, well, become enlightened, right? So to help us become enlightened means to help us manifest all the most pure, the good, the highest, the kind of best potential of our own mind. So eventually, when we become enlightened, we are our own teacher, and all of our qualities are exactly the same as any of our other teachers. So in a way, like, the way when we decide to take someone as our spiritual teacher and relate to them as our guru, as our lama, then we practice trying to see them as a manifestation of an enlightened mind, which means they're an emanation of all the Buddhas. And does that mean that that's what they actually are? In one hand, yes, but in another hand, like, we can't really know, actually, because we just, like, I don't know if you're a Buddha, you don't know if I'm a Buddha. Like, we don't know what other people are because of obscurations of our own mind. But it's definite that by seeing our teacher as a Buddha, it helps ripen our own potential for enlightenment. That's the main function of a spiritual teacher. So on the one hand, a spiritual teacher definitely is someone who should be, well educated, have experience. I mean, educated in whatever we're learning from them. They should be more learned than us. They should, be practice pure morality. They should be a role model for us. So in an ordinary way, like, why do we need a spiritual teacher? It's just like, why do we need a teacher for anything? Because we don't know. Like, why do we need a teacher of the alphabet when we're young? Because we don't know the alphabet and we need to learn it. So in one way, like, yeah, we need a teacher just because we want to learn about something and they have more expertise or more knowledge about that than we do. And so we learn from them. But in the ultimate way, like, especially when we're practicing the Mahayana path, then we're striving to ultimately achieve enlightenment. So we need to rely upon someone who, ideally someone who is enlightened. But yeah, but I guess it's invaluable for practicing the path if whoever we're relying upon and we trust them to be able to unmistakably guide us on the path to enlightenment, that by seeing them as enlightened, by practicing, seeing them as an enlightened being, then becomes a powerful uh, kind of condition for ripening our own potential for enlightenment. Right? So that's another mistake often people make, is they think that, oh, by relying upon a teacher, it means I need to ask them everything. They kind of, it's almost like put our whole life in their hands and ask them to do all the thinking for us, which is not the case. Like, we need to recognize there's an external teacher, but there's also an internal teacher. Like, we are our own teacher. Like, I mean, it's one thing the Buddha clearly taught. You are your own guide. You should be an island unto yourself. So the function of the external teacher is to help us develop our internal kind of wisdom and compassion and qualities. Okay, so in short, that's kind of what a spiritual teacher is. Okay, then the need for a spiritual teacher and the need for a teacher in spiritual practice. So yeah, and one is just to learn new information, to get a correct understanding of different topics, different texts, different practices, different meditations, someone to ask questions to. But I think more importantly, it's like to be a role model for us. And then, yeah, someone who kind of embodies the teachings, in a coherent and inspiring way that no book or, video or something could. So whoever we decide to take as a teacher, they should in some way kind of embody the teachings in a way that's more like we can relate to, more directly. We can see, we can talk to, we can be around, we can feel what it's like to be in the presence of. So it gives a much more like holistic picture of what the Buddhist teachings is, not just what is, what understanding we get from books or something, and reading and hearing about, but what it's like to be in the presence of someone who embodies the kind of spiritual path that we want to follow. Right? So, yeah, so there's those different needs for a teacher. Yeah, maybe again, if you have any questions, we can come back to talk about more. The dangers of entering into a teacher-student relationship. So this is a heading I added. This it's not in Pabonka Rinpoche's book, although there's some discussion about it. Lama Zopa Rinpoche also alludes to it, but it's not like a separate heading. But I think these days, especially for us who, for many of us who come from a not traditional Buddhist background or culture, so, and then, engaging with this Buddhist kind of culture background, it's, I don't know, there's a huge potential for confusion. And one of the most destructive, like, fields for confusion is around the guru-student relationship. So, I mean, some of the big dangers are basically well, basic one is that you become utterly disappointed, basically the big danger is that you jump into a student teacher relationship with someone before checking, like, very carefully. So that's why, one, it's important to check very carefully who the person is and what are their qualifications. So that's what actually we want to spend most of this session on. Sure, quickly running out of time, but on about the different qualifications a teacher should have and how to check. But I guess maybe to give a sense of the importance of that first is you have to think about the danger of. So if we jump into a relationship without checking first, at first, you know, I don't know, it's kind of like a marriage or something also. If you don't check first, then you end up in a relationship that you just want to get out of, right? So, um, so yeah, so if you jump into a relationship too quickly and then you start learning and seeing all kinds of things about the lifestyle or the behavior of this person you've taken as a teacher, then it becomes very confusing for oneself personally. Can be like, well, what is that? Is that a manifestation of enlightenment too? Like, you know, sleeping around or drinking or, you know, manipulating people to get money or favors, these things, all kinds of things that, you know, immoral people do. Then people who pose as teachers, they can also do those things, you know, because also, I mean, it's a big danger in our culture now because like in Tibetan culture, there's very strong, I mean, not that there aren't these kind of problems in Tibetan culture, there are, but because Buddhism's very old in that culture, then there's very strong kind of, I don't know, what do you say, like expectations for anyone who's kind of being put forward as a teacher or putting themselves forward as a teacher. First of all, if someone's putting themselves forward as a teacher, that's a big red flag, no, because it's egotistical. Whereas you see in Western culture, that's not there. Like there isn't that. So, and like in Tibetan culture and Asian culture in general, there's a huge kind of a sense of, not, it's not quite shame and embarrassment. That's too strong, but a sense of humility. That even if other people do consider one as a teacher, one considers one puts oneself down. One keeps one's as a practice of humility. One, you know, when one refers to oneself, one always, you know, recognizes one's own faults, and doesn't promote oneself. As soon as a person is like seen promoting themselves, that's considered very, you know, that's just following the ego and the self-cherishing, self-grasping, and pride, I mean, afflictive pride, arrogant pride. So, and then, but then with also in Tibetan culture, because there's, you know, recognition of, well, what are the qualities a spiritual teacher should actually have, and they're not easy to have, then it's not easy for people to put themselves forward as a teacher. Whereas in Western culture, especially in like the kind of new, like spiritual traditions that are new to the West, then there's not really any clear expectations or morals. It's like anybody can just kind of say and do whatever they want because it's a whole new field. No. Whereas like think like in the Catholic Church, to be considered a teacher in the Catholic Church, you have to get approval from the whole different levels of this whole hierarchy. You know, it's not just anyone can decide, oh, I'm going to be a priest and give homilies at a church. Like there has to be approval from this whole structure. Even in the Protestant church, which is much more open in general, you have to, you know, you have to do some seminary training and kind of be recognized as a minister, which, you know, it involves some people kind of recognizing you. Whereas like in the Buddhist world in the West, to be considered a Buddhist teacher, like what qualifications do you have to have? Like there's not really any established sort of hierarchy or, you know, kind of universal expectations among Buddhists, because it's a whole new thing. So you see people who maybe have received a few teachings, done a little retreat, maybe even done a 3-year retreat. In a way it sounds, oh wow, you know, 3-year retreat, but actually it's not sure like what's going on in the person's mind, you know, during a 3-year retreat. Like anybody can just go sit in a hut, like, and have someone deliver food and just relax. You know, like Geshe Michael Roach. I mean, did a 3-year retreat, but is like, you know, dancing, doing ballet like every day with his students, and then, you know, sleeping around with students. Apparently, I don't know. It's like doing all kinds of things that it's not really Dharma. It doesn't even look like. I mean, I can't judge. Like, I don't know. Maybe he's a Buddha. I don't know. But to external appearances, it looks like not not really practicing Dharma, right? So yeah, we, especially in Western Buddhist culture, we have to be really careful okay, it's okay to like, read books, go to lectures, take courses, do retreats with people. But before you commit yourself to, whether they're Western or whether they're Tibetan or whatever ethnicity they are, like before you commit yourself to like being their student, taking them as your teacher, you really need to check carefully, up to 12 years, right? And so there's different ways of checking. Um, um, yeah. So one is just to look at their own behavior. What they say is, what do they act in accordance with what they're saying, what they're teaching. Another is to look at who are their teachers, who are the teachers that they've received, because that's very important. If they have valid like Buddhist teachings, they should be part of a lineage. So they should have received extensive teachings from someone who themselves is a valid part of that lineage, going back to Shakyamuni Buddha. So that's another one. Look at who are their teachers and how close are they to their teachers? How do they relate to their own teachers? Do they really respect them? Have they practiced guru devotion properly in relation to their own teachers? Or are they just making stuff up on their own because they think they're enlightened or something? So one, are they moral? How do they relate to their teachers? Anyway, those qualities we'll come back to. And then another one, how do they affect your mind? Not just in a very superficial way over a short time, but over a long time, you see them again and again. Do they seem to inspire you to be a better person? Do they have a sincerely beneficial effect on your own mind? Are they a good role model? And what do you want to become like them? Is that the kind of person you want to become like or not? So those are all things to check. So again, some of the dangers are, yeah, you become, if you jump into a relationship too quickly, you get disappointed. I mean, even worse, all the things that go along with like being part of a destructive cult. Like you lose your money, you lose your house, your relationships are destroyed, and your faith in Buddhism is utterly destroyed. Like those are all kind of the dangers. So I mean, I've seen people, yeah, very close personally, no, but kind of from afar, I've seen, people get involved in teachers who later they find are behaving in ways that that's difficult, that is, what is it, doesn't meet their expectations, to say the least. And it's extremely difficult. It can really be one of the most painful things I think you can experience in life, like mentally. um, so yeah, so you really want to be careful about it. And then, okay, so how to find one's teacher? Yeah, that's a big question also. People have, basically is to meet different teachers, to attend teachings by different teachers in person. I mean, ideally in person. Attend teachings, attend teachings, go to retreats, request interviews, talk with people, talk with the students of different teachers, and then get a sense of who that person is, what kind of teacher they are, how they relate to their students, what kind of path they're guiding, how they guide people. Um, and then you see there's really, I mean, I guess for many of us who maybe have like full-time job and family commitments and so forth, it's not easy to like make time to go. Like when I found most of my teachers, I mean, I was just kind of a free ion, just like floating around Thailand, Nepal, India, and so it's not difficult to meet teachers. And then of course when you become ordained, like that's what you do, you go to teachings. So, but yeah, but I know for many of you, maybe it's not difficult, but that's why it's important for centers to invite teachers to come, so that you give the members of the community an opportunity to meet different teachers. It's very important, no? To invite, especially lamas who are like lineage holders, like these days, Jada Rinpoche or Yangten Rinpoche, or there's a whole list of lamas in the FPMT registered teachers, Khandrula. It's so important to invite those kind of teachers, because they do have, there's no doubt they have qualities that, most the kind of many of the resident teachers or other like Western Sangha and stuff, many of us, we don't have. No, I mean, I can speak for myself, or speaking for myself, I don't have, otherwise, or don't show the aspect. I mean, different teachers show different aspects. So yeah, so it's important to yeah, to find a teacher, basically read, can read books, look at videos, receive teachings. But finally, before you take someone as a teacher, it's good to actually, in person, receive teachings in person. Then one nice thing in the, oh yeah, at the end of that article by Lama Zopa I just mentioned, the need for a spiritual teacher. What is it? This one. Guru devotion, a brief introduction for new students. He discusses, so this is another question that comes up. Is it important to formally ask someone to be your teacher? And Rinpoche says no. And I think that's true. No, it's not really necessary. It's because whether someone's your teacher or not is mainly from your side, right? The way we relate to them. As soon as we relate to them as being a teacher, being our teacher, we see ourselves as their student, and then we receive teachings, then they become. But then naturally they understand, and then if we then take initiations, then they understand. I mean, from the teacher side, they can see who's there. They look to see who's there, and then they can see by the way we relate to them that we see them as a teacher. So that understanding comes. It's not necessary to have an express conversation about that. And I don't know, in Tibetan culture, it'd be kind of awkward. Like it's not, I don't know, it's not something you say like, oh, will you be my teacher? It's just, I don't know, it's just something that's understood by the way you act. But that said, if you do, I mean, to say, ask someone, will you be my teacher? It's not like bad or something. It's just kind of not so normal. And it's kind of a Western thing to do, but it's okay. Because the intention, of course, is just good, yeah. Okay. So I don't know, maybe any questions about any of those things? I know there's a lot, I mean, about each of those points, there's a lot more that could be said. So that's why I'm asking if you have any questions.
So, Geshe, let's start. I'm wondering, when you say that you don't have to ask formally, I don't understand what that means. So if you don't ask, how do you know, or they know that you're the student? So I think I'm missing something.
No, yeah. Well, first of all, just because a person becoming your teacher mainly depends on the way you think of that person, right? So if you generate the discrimination, means you generate the identification. Oh, now this person is my teacher and I'm their student. And then as soon as you receive, on the basis of that, you receive even one explanation of one verse or even one mantra or something, then they're your teacher, right? So and then how do they know that you consider them to be your teacher? Right? That was the second part of your question. One is how do I know they're my teacher? So that is mainly your discrimination. And then how do they know that I'm relating to them as my teacher? Well, I mean, think about it. There's all different kinds of situations. So like, think about it, like with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he has millions of students, like literally. So he doesn't know everyone who's his student. There's a teaching, and in Bodh Gaya at the temple, or like I was just in Dharamsala. In Dharamsala at the main temple, there's thousands of people there. There could be 5,000-10,000 people there. Like His Holiness doesn't know which among them see him as a teacher and who's just there as a tourist, just watching. And it doesn't matter. So we can be one person in that, in that situation and really have faith and want to take, refuge or bodhisattva vows, or even online, like just on Sakadawa on June 4th, His Holiness gave bodhicitta. It wasn't clear, actually. It was like he gave the generating bodhicitta ceremony. So we can at least say he gave aspirational bodhicitta vows. So we can even be online, and we can just think, oh, I just want to participate because I like he's so inspiring and watch, and not take as a teacher. Or we can think, oh, I'm taking these as a this vow. I'm taking this bodhisattva vow from His Holiness. I'm taking refuge from His Holiness, and then he becomes our teacher, right? from his side, he's going to keep doing the same thing. Like, so that's one. We're in a large audience, like it doesn't matter. And we're not going to have, most of us, we won't have opportunity to have a personal audience with His Holiness and tell him about our lives and things. He doesn't have time. But in another situation, it might be like a visiting Lama came to, Ocean of Compassion Center, and they gave refuge, or they gave an initiation, and you decided to attend, and you took refuge, took bodhisattva vows, you took tantric vows. Then they're looking, they know who's in the audience. They know, like, and so in one way, you could just decide, okay, I'm taking them as a teacher, and then you don't really have to. The main practice is seeing them in a pure way, right? So you don't have to, like, they don't really, it doesn't have to be an express conversation, like they know that you're there. But you might also decide, oh, I want to have a closer connection. So if they have time, I'd like to have a personal interview and just get to know them a bit better and ask them some questions, especially ask Dharma questions is very good. And then, by the way, by you doing that and you asking questions and seeming and then especially whatever, if you ask for advice and then take their advice seriously and try to follow, then they understand that you're relating to them as a teacher. There's no need to ask them, do you know that I'm seeing you as a teacher? It becomes awkward, right? Usually in Tibetan society, if you go to have a personal audience with a teacher, oftentimes if they feel that you're relating to them in a sincere, like respectful way, and that you want to have a closer connection with them, that you see them as a teacher, as you leave, they'll give you something. They'll give you a piece of fruit. Okay. If they give you a piece of fruit, it means they accept. They're not going to ask, do you see me as your teacher or not? But what it means is they accept. If you want to see them as a teacher, they accept that, they accept you in that way if you want. If they don't give you a piece of fruit or something as you leave, then either they just forgot, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you have to check. But that's typical, So, but then, it almost becomes, but then there's also like Western teachers, like FPMT registered teachers. There it becomes a little bit more ambiguous, right? Because those kind of customs are not so much there. And also because many Western teachers, like we're not really comfortable seeing ourselves in the role of teacher, But yet, like I have Western teachers, some that when I've done a November course at Kopan, a whole month course, or some other like introductory courses even. Then at the time, I didn't really understand like what it is to practice guru devotion. But later, as I studied more about guru devotion, I recognized, no, I did see them as a teacher and they benefited my mind. So I should relate to them. In my own practice, I should relate to them as a teacher. But then, like, when I go to see them and I'm around them, if I act like, oh, and I make prostrations to them and, act all like completely kind of, I don't know, subservient, or make too much of that relationship, it becomes awkward, like for everyone. So it's important just to, and especially just relate in a way it's comfortable for both you and the other person and is ordinary. But that doesn't mean you see them as ordinary. Like my Western teachers, when I see them, I treat them with respect. I might offer a gift, offer a kata, just say, oh, it's so nice to see you, inquire about them. But I wouldn't like make prostrations in public, Like with Lama Zopa Rinpoche or His Holiness, as soon as I see them, like I'll make prostrations on the airplane or like, and wherever. But for like my Western teachers, like they would feel really, really, they wouldn't like that. No, they would feel really uncomfortable if we were to do that. So, yeah. So with them, I don't know, back to, is it important to have a conversation with them about, they're my teacher, or, do you accept me as your student or something? I don't think so. No, it's more in our own mind. Over half our time is gone now. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? Okay. Sorry, that became a 10-minute break. No. But in India, it's like that. No? You guys are in America, people are on time, but India, it's okay, be a little late. I'm gonna have to get used to American timing soon, I think, when I come back. I'll have to stop wagging my head like this when I mean yes. Okay. Any other questions so far? I mean, yeah, there should be a lot actually, but yeah, if you have any.
I do
Siggy,
have
I
a
know.
question.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's quite related to what you talked so far, but it's about when there are several lineages of the teachers, the Buddhist lineages, and then how do you decide, like, okay, which one, because each lineage may have slightly different practice to follow. So essentially, it seems to make sense to just have just one practice to follow, and then rather than doing all of the almost like a mixed bag, especially nowadays, seems like we get exposed to so many teachings from everywhere through online teaching.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. It's important to think about. I mean, the short answer is, well, you don't have to only follow one or only the other. So it's okay to take teachings and do practices from different lineages. But it is good to kind of mainly follow one, because that way you get from within kind of one way of approaching Buddhist teachings, you gradually get a whole, I guess you get an understanding of the entire. It's important first to get an understanding of the entirety of Buddhist teachings from within one kind of lineage, so that it's all coherent, it fits together, it's clear. There's a rationale that enables you to connect to all of the Buddhist teachings like in one coherent way. And then within that understanding, then it's a good basis then to connect with all different lineages and all different teachers. And then within that framework, that makes sense. So that's the typical advice is generally especially when if we're new to Buddhism, be careful about taking too many teachings and try to engage with too many different lineages, because it can easily become confusing because we don't know how to merge the differences, and it can lead to a lot of mistakes. So it's better at first just study within one kind of lineage. That doesn't mean, of course, you can't receive other teachings, but mainly focus on studying within one kind of lineage of Buddhist teachings. And then, and that's why it's important also to study, not just practice one pith instruction, as His Holiness often says again and again, but to study in such a way that you get a broad understanding of the Buddhist teachings based on the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are common to all of Buddhism. So based on the Four Noble Truths, based on the three baskets, the three pitakas, and study Buddhist teachings broadly to get an understanding. And the Lam Rim, I mean, it's unique to Tibetan Buddhism, but it's an incredibly useful tool for understanding how to take, all of the Buddhist teachings that fit into the Four Noble Truths, how to organize them as a path of personal practice, And so it relates all the aspects of Buddhist teachings in as a path of personal practice. So then once you get that kind of whole understanding, then you can, take from different lineages and different traditions, and how they all fit in a coherent way. And it is much less likely to become confused. Yeah. I think, also in different traditions, there's different ways of relating to the teacher. Like generally in the like in the Pali tradition or the Theravada tradition, I don't think there's not so much expectation that you see your teacher as a Buddha. No, that's quite unique to the Mahayana, to the Bodhisattva, the Sanskrit canon. And a lot of that comes from Tantra, actually, from the practice of Tantra. So maybe it fits to mention here, just like in terms of like practicing within like the Pali Canon, generally one sees one's teacher with great reverence and respect as one would see the Buddha. So you see your teacher as a representation of the Buddha, like an ambassador of the Buddha. You don't have to see them as being the Buddha, but as someone who is like the Buddha's representation now, right? Like Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, showed the aspect of passing away 2,500 years ago, but the one who upholds his teachings and kind of by study and by their own practice is our teacher. So we see them as a representation of the Buddha, and we show the same kind of respect to them as we would to the Buddha. But it doesn't mean we see them as being a Buddha. Whereas in the Mahayana or the Sanskrit kind of canon, because I mean it kind of fits, because in the Pali canon, according to like the Vaibhashika and the Sutra school, the lower tenet schools, actually when Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, his mental continuum ceased, right? So Shakyamuni Buddha ceased to exist. According to the Sanskrit canon and the higher tenet schools, when Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, he just kind of ceased appearing in that aspect, but his mental continuum continues to exist and exists now, and he continues to emanate enlightened activities to benefit beings. So that's why when we see our teacher as being an emanation of that energy of Shakyamuni Buddha and all the enlightened Buddhas, and that's why we see the teacher as being a Buddha. I mean that's also I wanted to kind of mention. I did mention earlier, but just to emphasize, like that's the essential practice of relying upon a guru, like in the Mahayana tradition, is you see your teacher as being a Buddha. And then in Tantrayana, not only you see them as, in the sutra, then you see them as being a Buddha, but appearing in an ordinary way. In Tantrayana, you see them as a Buddha, and you try to see them as appearing as an enlightened being. The appearance is different. It's the main difference. But if, yeah, so yeah, that's the main difference. Questions? Yeah, maybe I'll just add. So, like the essential, because I was thinking in the break, there may be a couple points I should kind of make. See if I can remember now what they were. One was that, yeah, the essential practice of relying on a teacher is seeing them as being in entity a Buddha. I mean, and that's why it's such well, that's why there's such potential for harm, for danger, because if we I mean, to be a suitable disciple, also you need to really be willing to endure hardship and really try to practice well what the Buddha what the Buddha taught, the instructions the teacher gives. So if there's there's a great potential, I guess, for someone using, immoral person, abusing that kind of devotion and respect from students and misusing that, for harm. So that's why it's such a something to be so careful about. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, sometimes it's kind of like described like atomic energy, this kind of power relying upon a guru. There's potential for great benefit. And in fact, I mean, it's called the foundation of all good qualities. Like it's the very basis for developing all our, realizations, all good qualities on the spiritual path, is like correctly relying upon a teacher. In one sense, because we only learn. To learn, we need to learn from someone who has more knowledge and experience than us. So everything we learn to practice on the spiritual path comes from others. But on the other hand, there's this more esoteric aspect of, that realizations arise in our mind in dependence upon the blessing of the guru, the blessing of the teacher. And that's kind of the most mystical aspect about guru devotion. It's very difficult to explain. But I think one way, you know, for us trying to understand that is, I think is kind of like, look at this universal experience of human beings in any religious practice, that in any religious tradition, there's a sense of this kind of, you know, all pervasive mystical like force of good that if I connect with, it's kind of the life force of my spiritual practice. Like that if I have, you know, very pure mind, not selfish, but selfless, and not um, uh, like overly skeptical, but like with faith and, you know, mind of love, then you connect with, there's a sense of like this all pervading spiritual energy that we can connect with. And that the more we connect with that, the more we kind of mature and develop as a good person. So that in Buddhism, that's expressed as this, you know, relating to a guru. So when you see someone as your teacher, you want to see them as an embodiment of that kind of, in Buddhism, we'd say enlightened energy. You know, in Christianity, they'd say God, or other, you know, most other atheistic, monotheistic religions, I'd say God. But it's kind of the name for the same, there's a sense, and the way, of course, different religions explain in detail what that is differently, but in Buddhism, there's a sense of, you know, like just this, as I just said, like Shakyamuni Buddha's whole enlightened mind and the energy that goes with that, it exists now, and it's all pervading, you know, all pervades all of existence, right? And its essential features are, you know, infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite love, and infinite kind of energy working for the benefit of sentient beings. So definitely, if that is true, if that really exists, then definitely it appears in ways to benefit beings, to teach beings, to guide beings on like a good path. So then in Buddhism, when we decide to relate someone as a teacher, the main practice is to see them as being an embodiment of that enlightened energy and relate to them in that way. Now, whether they really are or not, like, of course, once we see them as a teacher, we just think they are. We put aside doubts. Before we take them as a teacher, that's the time to have doubts and to be like, oh, are they really that or not? But in a way, the question is not, when we're analyzing to see if we want to take someone as a teacher or not, in a way, the question is not so much like more, are they a Buddha or are they not? Because we'll never really be able to know that until we ourselves are enlightened. The question is more like, can I relate to them as a Buddha or not? Am I going to be able to, you know, for the rest of my life, like relate to them as my teacher in the sense that they are like an emanation of all the Buddhas? And by doing that, and if I do relate to them in that way, will that be beneficial for my mind or not? So, and then as much as possible, we also we don't want to just decide with regard to anyone that we're going to do that. They also should have, you know, some basic characteristics, qualities that we're about to get into that kind of ensure that, you know, they will benefit our mind, like being moral. First of all, they should just be a moral, ethical person, right? Not kill, not steal, not lie, not engage in adultery, not take intoxicants, at least keep the 5 lay vows. Right? And abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions and have a sense of, you know, being a moral person, honest, so forth. But anyway, we'll get into all those qualities. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll look at the qualities of a teacher then now. Okay, so these are the main, there's 10 qualities for a Mahayana teacher. So of course, this is presenting the Bodhisattva path, or the Mahayana. So for a Mahayana teacher, from the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, there's this verse here where it sets out 10 qualities a teacher should have. So this is kind of the standard presentation of what qualities one should look for in a person one's considering taking as a teacher. So the verse says, rely upon a virtuous friend who is subdued, pacified, highly pacified, has greater knowledge, has joyous perseverance, is learned in scripture, has realized emptiness, is skillful in teaching, has a compassionate nature, and has abandoned discouragement. So I'll send this out later. It's also in the readings. I mean, it's quoted in all over the readings that in the for required things. But so yeah, so to elaborate on those that as are listed in that verse. So the first is they possess, the first three all relate to the three higher training. Remember the three higher trainings: higher training in morality or ethical discipline, the higher training in concentration, and the higher training in wisdom. Right. So the first here, try to get my annotator pen going. So spotlight. No. Well, that's not the one. Well, oh, no, there we go. Okay. So this one: subdued, pacified, highly pacified. I like that fades. Okay. Those three, those are the represent the three higher trainings. So subdued means possesses a higher training in morality, ethical discipline. Then pacified means not only they're moral, but they have a single pointed concentration or calm abiding. So they possess the higher training in concentration. And then highly pacified means, so here the higher training in wisdom. So here it means not that they've realized emptiness according to the highest school, but that they have one of the Buddhist views of selflessness. So according to any of the four tenet systems, at least according to the Vaibhashika or the Great Exposition School, or on up. Here's the one I want. Okay. So again, how do we know that without ourselves having those qualities? Yeah, maybe like concentration. How do we know that single pointed concentration? Well, we see if they're a very distracted person or not, or if they seem, have quite control of where they put their focus of their mind. But we can't. It's difficult to really know if they have single pointed concentration or not. If they have the view, higher training in wisdom, well, see what kind of view of selflessness do they teach and do they explain, and do they have seemed to been able to subdue their own afflictive emotions, their own, attachment, selfishness, anger. If they have, if a person has obvious attachment, greed, jealousy, anger arising again and again, then they don't have the higher training in wisdom, right? They have the higher training in wisdom with one of the Buddhist views of selflessness. They should have been able to subdue, manifest afflictive emotions from arising. So that's why highly pacified, right? And then four, they have more knowledge than oneself in the relevant topic, right? So oneself might be a PhD or a great specialist in a certain field, but there might be a teacher who only has the transmission of like the Tara mantra. Then in relation to the Tara mantra, they're more knowledgeable than oneself, right? So in relation to whatever one wants to study or learn, then they have more knowledge, experience than oneself. Because if the person, like, if you want to learn about, meditative concentration, but you yourself have a more stable concentration than another person, then they won't help you. No? They won't be able to help you learn more. So they should, in regard to what you're learning, they should have more knowledge than oneself. And then they delight in others' welfare. So here means it's referring to this joyous perseverance. This one has joyous perseverance. It's translated as different ways, but what it means is they really take joy in benefiting others. They're invigorated by it. They're kind of, they have a passion to help others, to teach others. So it's like something they like doing, they enjoy doing, and they have a lot of perseverance to do that. They have a lot of energy to do that. Yeah. I mean, and kind of hand with that, this one kind of goes hand in hand with here, this one with 10. Does not tire of giving explanations again and again. So 5 is more on the positive side, that they have this joyous perseverance, but that enables them to endure hardships, right? And not tire of giving, not become impatient, but to be patient and just carry on. And then 6, they have studied the entire scope of the Buddhist teachings, the 3 vehicles, I can't say, and the 3 baskets, right? So they have a broad, understanding, knowledge of the Buddhist teachings. So where are we here? So as joyous perseverance is learned in scripture, right? So it means they have a good education in the Buddhist teachings. Ideally, they have, studied the 5 great treaties or the 3 baskets, with other teachers who themselves are scholars. But that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes we might want to receive, just a particular initiation or transmission of a text from someone who's not a great scholar. But in that case, like, even though at least they should be a moral person, have a good motivation, have a pure motivation, so forth. And then 7, they have realized the prasangika view of emptiness. So in this root verse, there's a question comes up, because here it says has realized emptiness, but above the highly pacified was they possess the higher training in wisdom. So the difference is, like I said, just to possess the higher training in wisdom, one doesn't have to have the correct understanding of emptiness according to the prasangika view, the consequentialist school. Here refers to that, having the correct view of emptiness according to the highest view, the prasangika school, right? So ideally they have that, they have a correct understanding of emptiness. And then 8, they're skilled in explaining by using, so that means they're skilled how? They're able to use quotes from authoritative texts and also from their own teachers, from teachings they've received. They're able to skillfully use analogies and examples, and they're also able to use logical reasoning. Well, they're able to support what they're saying with logic and valid reasons. And also they're just good at explaining. I mean, they can explain clearly in a way that makes the students like understand. Yeah, which also means like understanding kind of the mind of the students to some degree, and when the students don't understand, when they do, and so forth. And then 9, they're compassionate, and they care more about the students than about oneself. So this means they're not self-serving. This is a big one we need to be aware of, that they're really sincerely concerned about the welfare of the students, and they're not teaching or putting themselves in the role of a teacher in order to get something for themselves, in order to get honor and respect, in order to acquire money, in order just to have like paid vacations, different places, or nice meals and stuff like that. That they're not teaching in order to just to get the pleasures of samsara, driven by attachment, but rather they're sincerely, their fundamental motivation is sincerely to benefit others, to benefit the students, irregardless of any benefit for themselves. And then sincerely, empathize with the suffering of the students and want to free them from suffering, right? Compassion. So they have compassion and they care more about the students than themselves. So that's where it says has a compassionate nature, right? And generally they're just a kind-hearted person, which goes along with like they're not impatient, they're not angry, short-tempered, or selfish, and so forth. And then 10, they do not tire of giving explanations again and again. Here it says they have abandoned discouragement. So they don't get easily discouraged by or fed up with, with others, with their students. Or get tired giving teachings, but rather they'll explain, even I think about Lama Zopa Rinpoche, how he would explain the same things like again and again and again and again. Sometimes I wonder, how can he do it? No, but it's because there's no sense of like wanting something for oneself. It's just to benefit others. So just do what benefits others. So then so those are 10 qualities. So you might be thinking, wow, it's really difficult to find any teacher with all 10 qualities. So Geshe Potawa said that's why there's some are in bold here. So these 5 are in bold. At least a teacher should have possess higher training morality. So have ethical conduct, be a moral person. Means keep the 5 lay vows, or abandon the 10 the morality of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. And just generally be honest, be straightforward, abandon harming others and try to benefit as much as they can. So they should possess, they should be ethical. Then they should have, in relation to what you're learning, they should have more knowledge than oneself. Otherwise, they won't be able to benefit. They should have the correct view of emptiness, the prasangika view of emptiness. Otherwise, they'll lead one into generating wrong views about selflessness. And then they should have a compassionate nature and care more about the students than oneself. And they should not tire of giving explanations. They should be willing to, to help you, willing to explain again and again. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. You can read, maybe I won't say more about that now, but those are the 10 main qualities and the 5 kind of minimum. I think Geshe Potawa says something about even if they don't have all of those, at least they should be moral and know more than oneself. Yeah. Anyway, though, before taking someone as a teacher, it's good to check over a long time. No, like I said earlier, check who are their teachers, how did they relate to their teachers, do they have a good connection with the kind of lineage, how and what are their students like? Spend some time with their students. Are their students? Their students seem to have benefited from the teacher, improved? Are they the kind of people you would like to become like, to associate with, or not? And then, what the way they explain, do they act in accordance with their own advice or not? Are they just saying are they hypocrites? Are they saying one thing and doing something else or not? And then especially just how do they affect one's own mind, right? Do they have an inspiring and beneficial effect on one's own mind, not just over a few days or something, but over a long time? Yeah. And then some additional qualities for the teacher. A teacher should have, so Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasizes you should check their motivation. What's their motivation? If their motivation, like I said earlier, is just to acquire like things of this life, just attachment to get honor and praise and fame and so forth, then it's just all a cause of suffering and it won't benefit oneself. So the motivation at the minimum should be, their own motivation for teaching, for practicing, should be at the minimum to achieve happiness of future lives. Better than that, to achieve, liberation from samsara for themselves. They should recognize the faults of samsara, not be attached to pleasures in samsara, and wish to achieve, the happiness of nirvana. And then ideally, they should have the highest altruistic motivation to want to achieve enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, right? So they should have a bodhicitta motivation. Without a bodhicitta motivation, then if they themselves don't have the bodhicitta motivation to be of the greatest possible benefit to all sentient beings, and for that reason to achieve full enlightenment, then they won't be able to help you in generating that, right? So ideally they should have a bodhicitta motivation, altruistic motivation. In short, I mean, the person you take as a teacher should, in your experience, in your eyes, embody all the qualities that you yourself want to have. And then they can lead you to him those, right? And then also they should have pure samaya with their own teachers. So they should have properly relied upon their own teachers and have an unbroken connection with their own teachers. Those are the main qualities, yeah, a teacher should have. Well, I'll just look, the qualities of a student are less. There's just 5 set out. So I'll just explain those, and then we can maybe, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'll have time for questions or discussion. So as far as the qualities of a student, so that's us, then a qualified student should be impartial or unbiased. So it means we shouldn't cling too strongly to our own views, but we should be open to hearing, explanations of things that we're not familiar with. For example, if we don't believe in past and future lives, if we cling very strongly to that, not believing in the existence of past and future lives, then no matter how much a teacher explains about the reasons for the existence of past and future lives, it won't benefit us. So to be able to be benefited by a teacher, we have to be able to, it doesn't mean we just we take on board and believe everything they say blindly, not that, but rather we're not so biased or impartial that we're not even open to hearing or sincerely considering explanations that are different from what we already believe. So we're open to changing our ideas and beliefs. Only that way can someone teach us something new. Yeah, so rigidly clinging to things we already believe will become an obstacle. Then has intelligence to know right from wrong. So we need to have intelligence and the ability to think about things ourselves, and the ability to discriminate, in a basic way, ethical from unethical behavior, right? So, think about something that's just not the case. Like if we have a strong kind of wrong view that it's okay to cheat or steal from certain groups of people, or it's right to use violence in some situations to achieve what we want, or I don't know, some other kind of unethical behavior, then it's very difficult to be taught, to be guided by a spiritual teacher, if we have the kind of strong wrong views about different forms of really unethical conduct. So we have to have the basic intelligence to be able to discriminate between, basically, what does it mean to be a good person? What's kind of ethical, good behavior versus bad behavior? Yeah, or at least be able to, open to and be able to understand explanations of that, right? And so we need to be able to somehow modify, reform our own behavior, have the ability to do that. That's why animals, aren't suitable disciples, right? Because they don't have the intelligence to discriminate like right from wrong, right? Yeah. So yearn for the teachings and is hardworking. So we have to have a desire to receive teachings. Otherwise, no matter how great the teacher is, it's not going to benefit us. So we have to have a desire to learn and to practice, and also be hardworking. Be willing to put in time and energy in order to practice in accordance with the instructions we receive, and then have great respect for their guru. So we should have someone who has respect for the teacher. Otherwise, and this is especially relates to this sort of esoteric aspect of receiving the blessing of a teacher. Even because intellectually we can learn about things from a teacher, but if we don't have respect, it's like it won't enter our hearts. Our hearts will be, if we intellectually we think, okay, I can learn from this person, but if we don't sincerely have respect for the teacher, and if we see them as just being an ordinary person full of faults just as much as I am, and nothing special, nothing better than I am, then it's like Lama Zopa Rinpoche would often, I find this analogy very helpful. He'd use the analogy of like, our mind is like a desert. If we don't have sincere respect and if we don't engage in the practice of guru devotion, where the person who we see as a teacher, that we see them as a Buddha, It's like by seeing them as a Buddha, then and having sincere respect and making request and relating to them in this very kind of sacred way, it's like it becomes like nourishment and moisture for our mind and becomes a place where realizations can grow. Whereas if we see them in just a kind of dismissive, a very ordinary way, don't have any special respect or devotion to them, just see them as kind of equal to ourselves, as flawed as we feel ourselves are, then it's like our mind remains like a desert, just kind of dry and brittle, and nothing can grow there. So that's why, yeah, it's important. There's a nice analogy for the practice of guru devotion where it's like we should hold ourselves low like a valley, and then see the teacher as like a snow mountain, something high and very pure. And then our faith, the more faith and remembering their kindness is like the sun. So the more we have faith and we remember the kindness and we have appreciation and respect for the teacher, then it's like a sun that melts the snow. The qualities of the teacher then become like water that flows down in the valley and nourishes the crops. So, but if on the other hand, if we we hold ourselves up like a snow mountain across the valley from the teacher, like we're equal to them, and then our mind is like full of like, yeah, whatever, skepticism and dismissiveness, and it's like the sky is covered with dark clouds, then the snow is not going to melt. We're not going to receive any of the qualities from the teacher. And then we're, as a qualified student, also we listen carefully to the guru's instructions. So we listen carefully, and then we retain in mind what they've taught, and then we make effort to practice. So there's those 5 qualities. We're impartial or unbiased, has intelligence to be able to distinguish right from wrong, to have this basic intelligence. We have desire for the teachings and are willing to make effort in practicing. Then we have respect for the teacher, and then we listen carefully, are able to retain and practice at least some of the instructions. Those 5 qualities. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to go through today. Oh, and we're out of time, actually. We've used up all our time. So, but anyway, there's a few minutes for any questions you might have.
So I have a question. How do you know when a teacher has realized emptiness? Because that's one of the qualities.
Yeah, I know. That's a good question, and that's a difficult one. Yeah, see, again, it's like a catch-22 a bit, without ourselves having correctly realized emptiness, how can we know someone else has or not? We can't really know definitively, but and then even without ourselves, if we haven't studied about emptiness and don't have like even a correct intellectual understanding of, then how can we know? If someone else even has a correct understanding of emptiness. Yeah, again, it's really difficult. So, but we look at, well, what can we do? We try to get as close as we can. So, one, we can look at, well, we can ask friends, our friends who might know more than us about the view of emptiness. The correct, that we, is there anyone we know that we're confident that they have, even they're not our teacher, but they have a good understanding of the correct meaning of emptiness, and ask them, does this teacher, the way they explain, does it accord with the text? I mean, the basis is always to go back to the texts, right? So either if we're familiar with the text by teachings on emptiness by Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Aryadeva Buddha Palita, then that's best. But oftentimes we won't be, right? So we can ask someone else who we might feel confident that they are familiar, that they have a correct understanding, and ask this person I'm considering as a teacher, do they seem to have a correct understanding of emptiness or not? So we can compare with what it says in text, or ask others who seem to know. So that's one way of looking. Another way of looking, like I said, is the way, well, if the person has manifest afflictive emotions or not. Because if they have a correct understanding of emptiness and some practice of that, then there shouldn't be a strong sense of I. You know? There shouldn't be a strong sense of selfishness, of ego, that they're doing things motivated by the ego, by the wanting to, put themselves up, make themselves the center of attention, serve their own, attachment, basically, own worldly concerns. So there should be a sense of like, incredible sort of humility, and sincere caring about others that's not mixed with, wanting to get something back. So a sincere kind of selfish concern. Yeah. And then, also use whatever, like, we can listen to His Holiness Dalai Lama or other qualified teachers, their explanations of emptiness. And to the best of our understanding, does this other person, does their explanation seem to reflect that, be similar to that? Yeah, that's kind of the best we can do, no?
Could you go over the difference between the Mahayana and the Vajrayana view of the teacher, if there's any difference, because they seem very close in the way you've explained them.
Yeah, they're very close. As I understand it, the only difference is how you see because in the Vajrayana, the main practice is to to abandon ordinary appearance and ordinary grasping. And the main antidote to that is to generate pure appearance and pure divine pride, right? So in both cases, the Mahayana Sutrayana and the Mahayana Vajrayana, in both cases, you see the teacher as being the Buddha. But in the Mahayana Sutrayana, the practice is not to abandon ordinary appearance and ordinary grasping. The objects of abandonment are grasping at inherent existence. So, and abandoning self, and then the selfishness that arises from self-grasping and self-cherishing. So those are the two objects of abandonment. So you see the teacher as being a Buddha, but just appearing in an ordinary way. Whereas in the Vajrayana, you see them as being a Buddha, but also try to visualize them as appearing in a pure way, right? So that's the difference. Okay, well, yeah, sorry we didn't get to discussion group or meditation. So in the intervening week, then the way to meditate is to, the main meditation, I guess, for this week would be on the qualities of the teacher, right? And the qualities of the student, these ones. So the way to meditate on them is just, organize, meditation sessions, sit in a comfortable posture, generate positive motive, spend some time focusing your attention, generate a positive motivation, and then reflect on, the kind of teacher oneself would want. So one basis for doing that is to go through these 10 qualities that a teacher should have, and then these additional qualities, and then also just think in for oneself, like what are qualities one would like and would need, feels like for oneself one would need it in a teacher. And then see also if that leads to other questions about, do I need a teacher or not? Why or why not? How would I relate to a teacher? What kind of relationship would I like to have with a teacher or not? How might, I bring that about? Or is it okay for me, to what degree can I practice and take what I want from Buddha's teachings without, engaging in this kind of relationship with a teacher? Is it something I'm comfortable with or not? And then if one does want to engage in a relationship with a teacher, then check for oneself. Do I have the qualifications of a student or not? Either the 5 listed here, or are there other things that might be an obstacle for me in relating to a teacher? or not. So do I have, so sequentially meditate on each of these 5? Am I unbiased, impartial or not? How or how not? And so forth. And then see if there's other things that are related. So of course you can't do all that in one session, but over a few sessions, you can take your time and gradually sort of reflect like that. It's a way to meditate. Okay, so let's just briefly dedicate now. I don't want to keep you longer. So we can rejoice in whatever merit we've created by discussing these teachings on the qualities of a spiritual teacher and how to relate to a spiritual teacher and the need for having a spiritual teacher. So by the force of this, then may the Buddha Dharma flourish in the world and all spiritual teachings that benefit beings. And in short, may every sentient being, ourselves and others, be free from every form of misery and suffering. Especially the war in Ukraine may quickly come to an end, and wars in other places, Africa, South America, and hunger and thirst, especially places where there's famine and natural disasters, those different forms of suffering, and then also domestic abuse, other forms of violence and abuse may come to an end quickly. And may all beings have every form of well-being and happiness, peace, harmony with one another, loving kindness, support, education, food, clothes, shelter. And then also may the Guru's lives be long and stable, especially life of his host Dalai Lama and other teachers. And may we be not separated from them from life to life, always be able to meet again and again with them, receive guidance and teachings. And may Khyentse Lama's Zopa Rinpoche quickly manifest another reincarnation. Which shows the aspect of continuing the enlightened activities of Rinpoche from previous lives. And then may this Dharma Center, Ocean of Compassion Center, can have all the conditions to be able to flourish and offer programs like this and many others to countless sentient beings, providing immeasurable benefit. And then bring to mind any other prayers you yourself would like to make, personal prayers for yourself, for friends and family, and so forth. So may all those your own virtuous prayers and aspirations be accomplished in accordance with your intentions. Okay. Thank you all and have a good week. See you next week.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you, Geshe-la.